No amount of wealth and isolation will keep us from the problems in the country if we don't make it work for everybody. So by the time they're 18, the guy in Pretoria is going to be 100 kilograms and he's going to be an absolute machine. And the guy in the Eastern Cape is going to be 65 kilograms. How do you compete? If you really want to pull yourself out of bootstraps, COVID can't happen to you. The 2008 financial crisis can't happen. All of those things will break you down and push you back where it makes it very hard to continue down that track.
One of my other little pet peeves about the conversations about equality, like bringing down the standard. The easiest way to make everybody equal is to bring the standard down, to make everybody poorer.
If every single one of us pay it forward in a meaningful way every day, it's just a matter of time before you create a tsunami that renews the country and makes it a better place.
Hello, Justinus. Thank you so much for joining me today on Through the Fog. It's a real privilege to have you on the show and to dig in a little bit into your journey, how you got to where you are, and all the interesting things that you are keeping busy with. Tell me a little bit, where do you find yourself today?
So I'm in a small town in the Lowveld today called Hectorspruit, where my in-laws live. So it's on the border, just close to the Crocodile River and the Kruger National Park. So it's a beautiful part of the country. It's part of the country that never really experiences winter. So it's always fun to be here in August.
Oh, I love that. So it's like, I am completely over winter now in Cape Town. Well, my wife and I we lived in Pretoria for about 30 years. And Pretoria doesn't really have winter. Winter, we would often say in Pretoria, was like, this year it was on a Tuesday. And in Cape Town, winters are so long. And then it's almost spring. It's like 1st of September. It's like, no, spring day in Cape Town is the 1st of December. It's not the 1st of September. You have to kind of buckle down and wait. So, I can't wait for summer. I really miss the sun.
I actually lived in Cape Town for 3 years, and it was very hard for me. I sort of get depressed when it's overcast and rainy for 3 weeks, and I haven't seen the sun for a few weeks then.
Yeah, no, it does.
It's a challenge.
It does. Yeah, no, it does. It does suck, to be honest.
The only positive thing about the years I lived in Cape Town is all 3 of those years the Bulls won the Currie Cup, so it was pleasant to interact with the rugby supporters in Cape Town.
You can't say that in Cape Town. You can't say you're a Bull supporter in Cape Town. We live next to Loftus in Pretoria, literally one street over from Loftus in Farringdon Street. And then we would always hear the rugby games from our house because they would sort of close our area off, and then we'd always hear the games from our house. We lived there for about 3-4 years, and I think I went to 2 games. I'm such a terrible supporter. I was telling Flip, who we'll talk about, who was also on the show the other day. It's like the biggest irony that I'm talking to Flip about it, and I think to you as well, because I know so little about rugby. It's not even funny.
Oh man. It's funny because I basically grew up in Loftus. The first memory I have of life in general was the 1986 Test match against the Cavaliers, the All Black touring team. And my dad used to have season tickets, so we would go there every single week for probably 15 years. I didn't hardly miss the game.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So tell me, when you were that age, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Oh, rugby player, for sure.
Rugby
that was
player.
The only thing I was obsessed with rugby from. It's funny because when I was in grade 1, 2, and 3, I promised my mom I would never play rugby. And then she tells the story. I can't even remember it, but she tells the story that in grade 1, about standard 1, which would be grade 3 now, one day I just sent a note with a friend home after school instead of going home and said, "I'm so sorry, Mom, but I decided to play rugby." And from that age onwards, I was just completely obsessed with rugby.
Oh, sure. That's really cool. And then you grew up you grew up in Pretoria.
Yep. Grew up in Pretoria, went to Skoukranz in the east of Pretoria Primary School, and then Wilgers in Pretoria. And I think we matriculated in the same year.
Yeah, 96.
96 indeed.
Yeah, 96 indeed. There was a WhatsApp group started a week or so ago for our 30-year reunion next year. Whoa. And I told my wife, I was like, yo, 30 feels old. when it was 20-year reunion or 25, I was like, that's not that long ago. Like 20 still, it seems fine. But now 30 feels very long ago all of a sudden. And I told my wife, I was like, I think I'm grown up now. I think I'm out of high school for 30 years now. I think I might be just be grown up.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
Yeah, very, 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 very long time ago. Luckily, my school blazer still fits, so
Whoa.
can wear it
I don't think I can say the same. I was too skinny at school.
Oh no, that's so funny. So, tell me, Justinus, what mission are you on at the moment?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Of course.
So maybe let me set the context a little with We Think Code. So in 2013, in 2012 I left Bright Property, and in 2013 I went and did a sort of software development boot camp in Chicago in the States. And when I got back, I had coffee with a friend of mine the one day around close to the time that Mandela died, and we were sitting there and thinking that we have to do something to try and help the country, do something that can make sure that we create a country that works for everybody. Because I'm a firm believer in we'll either in the long term have a country that works for everybody, or we will have a country that works for nobody. No amount of wealth and isolation will keep us from the problems in the country if we don't make it work for everybody. So,
Yeah.
and we had both been in tech for a long time and both been entrepreneurs for a long time. So initially we sort of talked a lot about what can we do to help entrepreneurship. And then after I came back from the boot camp, I said to him, well, what does he think will happen if we sort of create an oversupply of world-class software developers? And that sort of started our thinking. And then the other question became, or sort of the fundamental belief was that if we assume that the ability to become a world-class software developer is normally distributed, but the access to the tools and things you need to develop that talent is not normally distributed, can we build something that removes all of the barriers that will allow people with very high aptitude but very low access to be able to bridge that gap? So we started sort of obsessing about that a little bit. We met two other entrepreneurs on the same journey, and the four of us got together and we started We Think Code in 2015. And the results has just been absolutely amazing. So every year now we get more than 50,000 applications, and we have a process that will weed out of 50,000 people the 500 most likely to be successful, people with high aptitude and everything they need to be successful. And then we put them through a 16-month program that teaches them what they need to know and teaches them to think and teaches them to problem solve, and then place them in full-time employment at the end of that. And the results is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, some of the stats is just insane. So when we started, the first cohort of 100 students, 8% of the students was female. Now in our current cohorts of about 500, 51% is female.
Really? I did not know
which
that.
is amazing.
That's very interesting. Because coding is always such a guy thing.
Yep. And it's fascinating how we solved that, because early on we realized that that's a problem and that nobody has really been able to solve it. So the Dell Foundation came to us and they said, okay, well, we'll support you and we'll give you the money to figure out how to get to gender parity in the student pool. And it took us 2 years and it worked like a charm. And I mean, we've always had a female CEO, so I think that's contributed. But what we did is we re-engineered the application process from the beginning. We made sure that the images and the media we're putting out included women, included black women, was like representative of the people we wanted to attract. And it almost immediately started to make a difference. And as I said, for the last probably 4 years, around 50% of our student body has been female. And to see how these people develop is just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, keep in mind, so don't quote me directly on the stats, but more or less in the ballpark figures, about 80% comes from a household that earns less than 350,000 a year, and about 70% comes from a household that earns less than 80,000 rand a year.
Yo.
So and what we do in the program, we actually, based on a means assessment, we pay a stipend to the students to help them through the program, and then we help them get employment at the end of the course as well. And the results is just absolutely mind-blowing. The students are exceptionally capable. They do a fantastic job. And it's been the most fulfilling thing I've worked on thus far in my career, for sure.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about it? If you have to pick like
My
a
favorite
moment.
No, it's every year graduation, which is actually this Saturday is the graduation in Johannesburg. And what's amazing about the graduation is that you see, like in Joburg, it'll be 250 kids. The entire family will be there, and you can see every member of their family has put on their best clothing. It's the highlight of their lives. The mothers are just like, they'll dance and sing, and it's just such unbridled joy. And then probably, I mean, I'm going to completely guess, but like 50% of the students that walk across the stage will be the first one in their family that gets any tertiary education.
Wow, that is fantastic. That is such a great story.
Oh, it's the most amazing experience. So with that context in mind, let me answer your question. So after I was lucky enough to attend the 2023 World Cup final with my son, which was an amazing experience. But after the final, we were on a train back to the hotel, and I started to talk to all the other South Africans in the train, which was probably about 80% of the people on the train. And I started to notice that many of them was expats living in London, living in Dublin, living in Amsterdam, living in Berlin. And all of them had decided within the drop of a hat in the last week or so after we won the semi-final that, they want to go to the final now because South Africa is playing. And then I thought to myself, well, the 4 times we've won the World Cup has been 4 of the best days of my life. And obviously that one was spectacular because my son, I had the opportunity to be there live and experience it with my son. And then I said, well, if all of these expats are so connected to South Africa on this day, and for all of us it's one of the 4 best days of our lives, what would we be willing to do to make sure this happens 5 times again before we die? So the calculation became, okay, well, let's say we keep the same winning record, which is 1 and 2. What do we need to do to win 5 of the next 10 World Cups? And I started reading a few books, read Sia's book, read Rassi's book, and started to try and figure out what it will take. And that journey has led us to now where we're almost ready to announce a new project, which we're thinking of calling 95. And the idea behind it is to build an endowment that focuses on the same assumption that we had with We Think Code, that there is still people with the talent in South Africa that doesn't have access and pathways to become professional rugby players. And if we can shift that, if we can give if every boy in the Eastern Cape had the same opportunity to play rugby that I had growing up in Pretoria East, how many more great rugby players can we produce out of the Eastern Cape, and how much more can we broaden the talent pipeline and make sure that South Africa win 5 of the next 10 World Cups? So that's the biggest passion and project I'm working on at the moment, and we're hoping to launch it in the next few weeks.
So that sounds fantastic. That sounds such a good. I'm really interested in what does it take? Like, what do you think it takes, or from your learnings and research, what do you think it takes to win 1 out of 2 World Cups?
It takes a lot of things. I mean, and a lot of things that, I mean, Rassi has obviously done an absolutely insane job. But I think ultimately what it what it takes is making sure we cast the net as wide as humanly possible for the best talent we can possibly get. And the comparison to Ireland is quite interesting. I mean, we already probably have, I think, factually the most rugby players in the world registered in South Africa. So we've had this sort of mining mentality where we just pick the best players and then obviously develop them. But if you compare that to a nation like Ireland, who's got a fraction of the rugby players we have, they've put in so much effort to development and taking what they have and making the best of it. And I think if we start employing a little bit more of that, especially in the Eastern Cape, where the unbelievable poverty, Eastern Cape being one of the poorest parts of the country, provides such an enormous barrier to the development of talent. If we can do more to make sure we develop the talent down there, it'll have such a tremendous impact. I mean, I don't know if you know. I mean, you probably don't because you're not a big rugby fan, but
probably not.
The black township-based rugby clubs in the Eastern Cape, many of them are like hundreds, more than 100 years old, like 120.
Oh yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah,
sure.
So I mean, like one guy I spent a lot of time with in the last week called Lincoln Marley. He told me a lot of the stories about his dad and their rugby club. I think it was founded in like 1893. So the rugby culture in the Eastern Cape is absolutely fanatical. It's nothing less than the rugby culture in Pretoria East. I mean, once I started going down that road and I wanted to see and go and explore it, I actually jumped on a plane from Canada and flew to the Eastern Cape and went to Kumani to watch Queen's College play Grey High School. And then the next morning we were in Queens and I was with a guy from SA Rugby and he said to me, why don't we just drive to a small town about an hour away called Stadtreim. And I said, okay, let's go. And we were driving there, and as we approached this town, and it's a relatively small town, or a very small town, there was an informal settlement next to the hill as you sort of drove into town, and between the informal settlement and the highway, there was a rugby field. And the guy said, well, once we're done watching the team practice at the high school, why don't we just go to that rugby field? I want to take a picture of it because I want to do a book of all the rugby fields across South Africa when I retire one day. And I said, no problem. So we went to the practice, we turned around, and we were approaching this rugby field, and we were sort of blocked by a concrete wall. And as we sort of came around it, and this was maybe 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, we started driving onto the rugby field, and here was a game taking place. And it literally felt like we were driving into Siya Kolisi's book, because it was everybody from a 12-year-old boy to a 40-year-old man playing. Half of them were wearing boots, and half of them were playing bare feet. So we stopped, we got out, and there's probably about 400 or 500 spectators next to the field watching this game on a Sunday morning. And we got out and we started talking to them. No, they said in this township, and I mean, I had to guess, probably no more than 3,000 people live there. There was 13 rugby clubs, and on that day, there was going to be 6 rugby games taking place. So it's just the culture and the rugby culture in the Eastern Cape is so embedded in their DNA. If we can just give enough people opportunity, the rugby stars from there that will come out of there is going to be even more unbelievable than what it already is.
I want to take a short moment to tell you about The Quest. The Quest is a transformative experience of self-inquiry that I run along with my friend Simon in the mountains in Franschhoek. It basically consists of a retreat, at the center of which lies a solo, where you spend time alone in solitude on the mountain, out in the open with only the basic necessities, whilst fasting. That means only drinking water. The entire process is designed to help you work through questions that you have. Questions like, what am I supposed to do next? Why am I here? Why am I making this decision? Why do I need to leave this behind? What do I need to leave behind? Or what do I have to pick up to move forward? It's a process that really digs deep into your motivations and helps you chart a way forward. If you are interested in joining this process, we are running the next one in October, and it is a 4-day in total quest. So 2 days of preparation, 24-hour solo, and then a day of integration. And if you're interested in this, please go onto my website. This is period.co/quest, and fill in your details there. And I will invite you to a info session or have a meeting with you to discuss about why you want to go on this and whether or not this is a good fit for you. This has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. I did my first one, a 12-day quest with a 4-day solo, about 8 years ago, and have facilitated many, many, many since. And I'm always amazed about how much this process transforms a human being. I would love to have you become a part of that circle. If this resonates with you, please reach out via my website. So what do you think the block is? Like, why? I mean, it's because rugby is perceived, still often is perceived as this white sport, this Afrikaans thing. And then what is the block from those kids playing in the Eastern Cape to going all the way through?
There's lots, but the first thing is, here's an interesting tidbit. Do you think that we control how tall we are?
Do we control how tall? No. Well, if you get the right food when you're young, you'll probably be taller or grow better. But exactly. So malnutrition is a big deal. Yeah.
Exactly. So over the last 150 years, the average male length has actually increased dramatically. Because we have records from like the British military 150 years ago that we measure against today, and we can see that the average length is actually increased. And the biggest reason for that is proper nutrition. So what happens if you live in absolute poverty?
Yeah, you don't get the nutrition you need.
You don't get the nutrition you need. So if you don't get the nutrition you need, you don't end up being as big and tall and strong. So even if on a technical basis you are the most talented rugby player at 12, and you take the exact two same boys with exactly the same talent, and one is growing up in Pretoria East and gets everything he needs from nutrition to coaching, etc., and the one grows up in absolute poverty in the Eastern Cape, by the time they're 18, the guy in Pretoria is going to be 100 kilograms and he's going to be an absolute machine, and the guy in the Eastern Cape is going to be 65 kilograms. How do you compete?
Yeah, there's no way. I see some of those like boys from Pretoria now. It's like, what? They were not there when I was there in 1996. They are insanely massive. It's all the creatine and the protein shake. I was just Googling. I saw that the difference between the average height of a man in 1920 was about 171 centimeters, and versus today is about 179 centimeters. So like 7 to 8 centimeters difference in the last 100 years.
That's amazing. Yeah,
that's insane. I'm 177, so I'm just under average. I'm not a tall person, but that's
what
crazy.
That does now.
Yeah.
But now what you start to realize is it can't just be also a rugby solution. It's got to be a holistic community-based solution where you work at malnutrition, you work at opportunities in most schools, and then you try and let the talent filter through, and you get the talent to go to high performance centers. So you need to build a entire ecosystem of things that will help those communities develop, and that's ultimately what we want to do. So if we build this endowment properly and it works like I would love to dream that it works, 1 out of 10,000 or 1 out of 100,000 people that we help will end up playing Springbok, but the other 999,999 people will also be better off. They would have, hopefully a better nutrition, better education, and have a better chance of succeeding at life and being successful at whatever they choose to do then.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. What do you...
so let me...
Yeah, go.
What do you think of that name, 95? What does it bring to mind when you hear it?
95, obviously the World Cup. I remember that day very vividly. Even though I don't watch that much rugby, I definitely watch those games because I am South African. I do love the Gees. Even I was in the 23 World Cup, I was in the US. and then sitting with a bunch of Americans, and they also all wanted to watch the game. It wasn't the final. I think it was the semi-final or quarterfinal. And now I'm the only South African, and and they're all asking me all the questions about what's happening on the field. So I am making stuff up as I go along, like telling them no.
But they won't know the difference.
They will have no idea. So I'm like, no, that's offside, or I know about 3 things about rugby. But I love the gees. Like, don't get me wrong, I do love the gees. But it's very hilarious. So I love 95. It's a brand. That could be a fantastic thing. Tell me, equality is an interesting topic for me, because my observation is that people want equality in result, and they are more concerned about equality in result than they are necessarily about equality of access. And then if you get into topics like a quota system that wants to guarantee a certain type of result, what are your thoughts on that? Is it helpful, or is there a balance, or is there a right way or a wrong way in your belief to kind of get the results that you want, or is it only about access?
I think that's a very, very complicated topic, and there's no simple answers. I mean, I can see the objections to it, I can see the justification to it, and depending on what angle you look at it, it's never easy. I mean, but let me give you this example. So if acquaintance of mine serves on one of the university's admissions committees for medical students. So they have to decide who gets the opportunity to study medicine. And I mean, everybody I've ever spoken to wants to study medicine, are super passionate about it, are super passionate about helping people. And even from when we were at school, getting into medicine is super hard. You need to perform at the top 1 or 2% in your school to even have a chance. And he said the hardest thing for him is to make the decision between somebody, let's say, that went to Menlo Park and scored 6 distinctions and had an average of 95%. He needs to be able to compare that to a person who came from a township school in the Eastern Cape, who maybe didn't even have proper classrooms, didn't have textbooks, but scored 80%. So how do you know whether that 80% from the person in the township school is the equivalent or better than the 95 from Menlo Park? And I don't know if you've read any of Adam Grant's books. He's got a book called Hidden Potential. And one of the things he talks about a lot there is that the perception in a merit-based system is that you take a snapshot in time and you decide who's the best and they get access. But he says that's not necessarily the best approach. What often works better is to draw a timeline over time and to see how people are improving. Because let's say, for argument's sake, we have 2 people we are comparing. Both of them are 8 out of 10. But the one last year was 7 out of 10 and the other one was 4 out of 10. So the one has improved from 4 to 8 and the other one has improved from 7 to 8. If you only look at where they are now, they look like they are equal. But if you compare their context, where they came from and how much they've improved over the last year, then improving from 4 out of 10 to 8 out of 10 seems to be more momentum towards future performance than from 7 to 8 out of 10. So I don't have a silver bullet answer for you, other than there's reasons why we have to change up the system and we have to invest more in granting access. And I'm a firm believer that in most cases, the ability is normally distributed, and if we actually make sure that access is freely available, that ultimately in any big enough sample, the results will mirror the distribution of the population. So if in rugby, even if you just say that you take all of the people whose first passion is rugby in South Africa, you're going to end up with 15 to 25 million people between most of the Afrikaners, most of the Khoisas. So let's say 25 million people in South Africa, their first passion in sport is rugby. then ultimately, if we have equal access across the board, the Springbok team in the long run should represent that demographic of that 25 million people.
That seems to make sense. Do you think in giving people access, so let me think, how do I frame this? Sometimes in giving people access, we make the mistake of removing their agency or their ability to develop capital. How do you navigate that? So
That's very hard.
there's something in fighting for what you want and working really hard to get what you want versus getting something that's for free. And for free. So so I'm making air quotes for everybody listening. How do you navigate that with We Think Code, or how would you navigate that with a project like 9 to 5?
That's such a great question. And I mean, let me give you an example from We Think Code, because we debated that endlessly in the beginning. Because we wanted to remove all the barriers, but we still wanted to be able to select the kids most likely to succeed. And a big part of what we had to make sure we have is that grit. I don't know if you've read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, but it's a fantastic book, and it talks about this subject in great detail. So what we ended up doing with We Think Code is we said, okay, we're going to remove the financial barriers, but we still want to be able to test and make sure people are committed to the outcome. And because we didn't want to take in 500 students and only graduate 250. So we wanted to make sure everybody who got in, 90% or more of them graduate, and we've been able to do that. And the way we did that is we demanded other things other than financial resources that they had to show they had. So in the beginning, we had a 30-day boot camp. So they had to show up, come to campus every day for 30 days, and we made it impossibly difficult. We literally threw them in the deep end. We gave them tasks that we knew they would not be able to solve on their own. So they had to show that they could learn the skills they need to be able to solve the problem, and they had to show that they could interact with other students and solve the problem together to be able to get through. So you can still test for agency, and you can still test for commitment, and you can still test for grit other than requiring financial things. And those are very good indicators of how people will perform later. And for We Think Code, it's worked fantastically. Our graduation rate has been sky high compared to any other tertiary education system in South Africa because we did that.
And how easy is it to graduate at We Think Code?
No, it's hard. It's hard. But it's harder to get in probably than, because, I mean, out of 50,000, we only choose 500. So you only have a 1% chance of getting in. But once you're in, you have a 95% chance of finishing if you put in the time and effort. But we've screened for that already. So by the mere fact that you got in, it means we believe you have the determination and the agency to be able to do that.
To be able to go, yeah. That's that gives me so much joy, because in my work in facilitating different type of sessions and things, I was working with a tertiary institution, which shall remain nameless, which without showing up to class, if you are a black student, you will get 50% without showing up. You don't need to hand in anything. You can just show up. So you can technically get your diploma or your degree without ever showing up or handing in anything. And then what happens is these students do get their degrees, and then they go and apply for a job, and they get the job, and then they can't do it. And then they get fired after about 2 or 3 months, and then they can't understand why this is happening.
Now, how does that reflect on the institution?
Exactly, on the institution and on the country as a whole. And it's also a disservice to the individual, because you remove their ability to learn, or the necessity to learn and push themselves and develop the grit that they need. Like, even if you get in for free, or you get in because of a quota system, you shouldn't be able to, in my thinking, like, you shouldn't be able to graduate based on that same merit. Like, that there should still be a barrier. Otherwise, you just remove all this ability or this opportunity to actually learn and grow as a human being. And it drives me insane. And I think that's one of the big challenges in our country now is that the more you remove agency or the more you remove obstacles, you actually at the same time you remove capital. You remove the ability to develop human capital. And that question about which obstacles should be removed is a very, very important one, because I completely agree with you that access is vital. But the other side of it, graduating or actually getting the thing, it shouldn't be easy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's such a complicated and nuanced scenario, because here's one of the other things is Yossi, my one co-founder in We Think Code, he sent me an article the other day that was written sort of for the American context. And what the article basically said is that Americans like to believe that anybody in the US can pull themselves up by their own bootstrap, and doesn't matter where you come from, if you work hard enough, you'll get where you want to go.
Yeah, the American
dream. And they
dream.
said yes. Yeah. And this article said yes, while it's possible, and it does happen, one, it's obviously strongly influenced by survivor bias, so you only look at the successful cases and you assume for everybody that would have been possible. The problem is for somebody to actually do that, they have to go through a 20-year period where nothing goes wrong. If you come from the worst parts of the US and you grew up in absolute poverty and you want to end up in the top 1%, you have to work your butt off, you have to be lucky, and nothing can go wrong for 20 years. Because if something goes wrong, then you end up back where you started. I mean, I had a great example when I was here in May. I was in the Eastern Cape again. Actually, Yossi was with me. And I had one of the Western Code students that I now employ that was with me as well. And he started telling me about this friend of his that was in the Eastern Cape in Kings Williamstown that had got 6 distinctions in matric, got a bursary to go and study at one of the universities up here in Gauteng, and went and started in 1999, and then in 2000 when COVID hit, he had to go back to the Eastern Cape, and he didn't have proper internet access, couldn't attend the classes online, couldn't actually do the stuff he needed to continue, and eventually got kicked out of university. Now, here's the guy with 6 distinctions working odd construction jobs in King Williamstown. So the barriers that a lot of people without access face to even just continue down the road when they get an opportunity is substantial, and makes and that's when Yossi sent me that article, say if you really want to pull yourself out of bootstraps, COVID can't happen to you. The 2008 financial crisis can't happen. All of those things will break you down and push you back, where it makes it very hard to continue down that track.
So what is the answer to that?
Well, the part of so let's talk about the US again, because it's a little bit easier to talk to something that's not directly related to us. But so in the US, at least in my understanding, for example, the school system is funded by local taxes. So the property taxes in any given area gets collected, and that gets used to build schools. So if that's the funding model, what do you think happens in wealthy suburbs, and what do you think happens in poorer suburbs?
Yeah,
wealthy
sure.
suburbs,
less money and less resources, and less schools, or lower quality schools.
Yeah, so what ends up happening in the wealthy areas, you have a school that looks like a Ivy League campus with stadium for the football and the most amazing classes, the most amazing teachers, everything the kid can ever wish to have, which is what every kid should have, and they have it. But then you go to a poor area and the schools are old and not maintained, and they don't have enough money budget to build facilities, and it just the cycle keeps repeating itself. So, which is what I like about Canada, is that because the schools are predominantly funded through provincial government taxes, in any given province, the schools, you won't get the same level of school that you get in the rich suburb in the US, but you also will never get the school that you get in the poorer suburb in the US. The standard is high, but it's relatively well distributed throughout the population. And that creates an environment where a lot more kids have access to the basics they need to be able to perform, and they have a much better chance of being successful in life, independent of what their home situation is like.
Yeah, that makes so. I mean, there's quite a few things that could be done at policy level to grant access. Because one of my other little pet peeves about the conversations about equality is it often ends up with making everybody, like bringing down the standard. The easiest way to make everybody equal is to bring the standard down, to make everybody poorer. Because then if everybody's poorer, then everybody's more equal, rather than trying to lift the standard. So very, very interesting. Very, very interesting and complex conversation.
That is super complex as well. But of course, I mean, let's look at the schools you and I attended. So you went to Menlo and I went to Wilgers. Both of those schools today, I believe, is far superior than the normal public school in Canada. The average kid who goes through those schools and graduate matric now, I would believe, is much better prepared, at least academically, for the life ahead. But that's the standard we have at Menlo Park and Wilgers isn't the average of what we have throughout this country. So how do we solve that problem?
Yeah.
How do we make every school in the country perform at that level? And we shouldn't need to lower the standards, but it's going to take an enormous amount of investment and resources to recreate what Menlo Park or Wilgers has in every school in this country.
Yeah, I mean, we can get stuck into a school conversation for quite a while, because what happens is as the government tries to create equality by lowering standards, the wealthy just remove their children and create their own schools or privatize schools, listed on the stock market. I don't know if schools should be listed on the stock market, but that's my opinion.
But the challenge is, again, it brings us back to this idea that can we solve all of these problems in isolation sustainably, or do we build a country that works for everybody? Can we really shield ourselves from these problems on a macro level by privatizing those things and living in our bubbles? Or do we need to do more to solve the problems on a macro scale for the country so that we have a country that works for everybody?
Yeah, those are very extremely good questions. Where does this passion of yours, Justinus, come from?
I think it comes from growing up and going to Loftus every day. That's really where I learned to be passionate about rugby and passionate about life, and it became shared memories that became part of our routine on a weekly basis. I mean, our routine used to be Saturday morning we would play rugby at school, and then in the afternoon we'd go watch rugby at Loftus, and then we'd go home and watch the game again on the TV. So, and we did it as a family, and we did it every week. So there, between all of the passionate fans at Loftus, I learned to be passionate about rugby, and that spilled over to every part of my life. And I think now, living abroad, rugby is such a powerful connection back to those memories and nostalgia and the culture and South Africa, that it becomes an easy way to grow the love for South Africa with the kids. It becomes an easy way to reconnect back to South Africa, and it's just part of who I am.
That's fantastic. Where do you live right now, mostly?
So, live in London, Ontario, so it's about 2 hours outside of Toronto, about halfway between Toronto and Detroit. So it's southwest Ontario. It's probably the part of Canada that's the closest to the US. It's about a 2-hour drive for me to get to Detroit, or a 2-hour drive the other way to get to Buffalo, New York.
Okay. And why did you move there?
For a business opportunity. So we've been married now for 26 years, and we've moved 25 times, and just about 20 of those 25 times we moved was because some sort of business thing I wanted to do. Moved around a lot in South Africa when I lived here in the private property days, including to Cape Town and Durban and back. And then, I've moved quite a bit. We actually have never been in the same place as long ever before. We've been there now for 5 years. mostly because my wife made me promise when we moved there, we would stay there until the kids finished school. Otherwise, we probably would have moved already.
That's really funny. I quite like that. Would you ever move back to South Africa?
That's a great question. I don't think I will ever move anywhere again. I think once the kids have finished school, I think we would love to have a more nomadic lifestyle, spend 3 months of the year in an RV, driving around Canada and the US, speaking to people about the endowment, spend 2 or 3 months of the year in a ski resort, and then spend 2 or 3 months in South Africa, and then spend 2 or 3 months wherever the kids happen to be at that stage. The summers in Canada is just unbelievable. The days are so long. I mean, it's where we live in the peak of summer. It's not dark till 10:30 probably at night. So the temperature is fantastic. So yeah, the summers there is quite amazing. So we would love to spend summers there, summers in South Africa, and then skiing and road trips in between.
Oh, well, that sounds amazing. Where did your passion for skiing come from?
It's funny because I was in 1998. I just met my girlfriend, which is now my wife, in October of 1998, and in that December, we were lucky enough that my dad took us to the US for 6 weeks, and we traveled all around it, including a week skiing at Breckenridge. And back then, I don't think I even had email or internet yet, so I would phone my girlfriend once every week, and I would send her a postcard everywhere we went. So the Breckenridge postcard, I actually still have that I sent her, and I just said something like, we're skiing now, and I love it. I think we'll do a lot of this for the rest of our lives. And that prediction came pretty accurate. We started then after that skiing with some of my business colleagues at Pride Property, so we used to go every year. And then when I decided to leave Pride Property in 2012, I said to her, why don't we just go live in a ski town for a winter and ski every day? So we ended up doing that, and that's how we ended up in Canada. So we skied every day, we loved it. We went back the next year, and then we said, well, why don't we just move to Canada so we can ski more? So we did that.
Was that the real reason?
No, it was absolutely
the real reason was for skiing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, we've enjoyed, and I mean, I've done skied many different resorts now. Most of the ones in British Columbia, a lot of the ones in North America. Went cat skiing a few times. I don't know if you know what cat skiing is.
Oh,
and then heli skiing once as well. So cat skiing, instead of being inside the resort and using a lift system to go up and down, they take these snow cats and they put a cabin on the back. So you're basically skiing in ungroomed terrain in the wilderness, and they'll drive up, drop you at the top, you ski down, and they pick you up again. And then heli skiing is the same idea. You basically just have a helicopter picking you up at the bottom and dropping you off at the top. So it's quite an amazing experience.
Oh, well, that sounds incredible. I mean, when we went skiing, we've been skiing twice. I'd love to go skiing more. But when we were skiing
Where did you go?
Time, the instructor told us. The first one was Chamonix in France. Yeah, which is quite a well-known resort. And the second one was in Crans-Montana in Switzerland, where we were lucky enough for friends of us have a house there, and they invited us to come skiing with them for a week, which was very fantastic. And we have so many funny stories because we were sort of like training. We were not, like seriously beginner. And we had an instructor. And then my wife, being a type 7 Enneagram and always up for like an adventure, said, no, it'll be fine. Let's do this blue slope because we'll be fine. We were not fine. It's like, and our kids were really young, and now they were like going down this blue slope, which was, I think, more like a red slope, to be honest. It was freaking scary. And I learned so many life lessons. I don't know, like life lessons in skiing, even with only those 2 kind of trips. And one of the things was, I remember standing at that slope at one point, and I was like, I was so tired, and I've fallen so many times, and I literally feel like I'm gonna start crying. Like I'm like 42 years old, and I'm gonna burst into tears because I cannot deal with going down this freaking slope. Like I don't want to go down this slope. And then I realized something. I was like, the slope doesn't care. The slope doesn't care how you feel. You need to do this. You need to go down this slope. There's only one way to get down this mountain, and it's by skiing down that slope. And I was like, that's like a really good life lesson. And there's so many. Our friend, they moved to Switzerland because they love skiing. And they also come from like South Africa. And she would say to me every day, she's like, remember, you have to lean into your discomfort. It's like you have to lean forward until it hurts. It's like, and that's the right place to be. That's what it should feel like. It should feel uncomfortable. And I was like, damn it, that's such a good life lesson, but I don't want to feel uncomfortable all the time. But there are so many good life lessons.
Learning to ski as an adult probably has so many parallels to doing anything, because it's the most uncomfortable, cold, the boots are uncomfortable, the terrain is challenging, emotionally it's taxing. So it's a really, there's lots of parallels to great life lessons, especially learning to ski as an adult, and it's one of those things you go ahead.
No, you can go.
Especially what I find is the first 3 or 4 days, most people, like men, feel like you do, but we try and hide it, and the girls end up crying every night. And the key is to be able to push through it and get to the point where you can actually do that blue slope top to bottom, and then you can decide whether you like it or not. Because before that point, you're giving up, and you're giving into the discomfort, and you haven't actually felt what it feels like to be able to do it. And then what usually happens is people who push through and get that feeling of actually skiing it down relatively comfortably say, oh, this is the best thing ever, I want to do it as much as possible. But it's the barriers to get to that point are so substantial that a lot of people fall out even before they get to experience that.
Yeah, it's a lot like life, I suppose, eh?
Oh, yeah. Especially like changing careers in life or starting a business. All of those things create such similar circumstances and such similar challenges.
Yeah, no, very, very, very true. I wanted to ask you, what do you say is the biggest life lesson from skiing? It's
that when you're at the top of the slope, like the best part for me is when you stand there and it's so steep you can't even see the slope down. Like everybody feels nervous. Even now, when I'm a reasonably good skier, I'll stand there and I still feel nervous. But standing there and trying to convince myself to go actually just makes it worse. The only way to get over the fear is to take action and start moving. And then once you're moving, it almost inevitably turns out not nearly as bad as what you predicted it would be.
It's the almost that's worrying. Like almost never. It's almost never. It's scary. That's the part.
I say almost because I don't like. I say almost because I never like to be definitive, because there's always an exception to every rule. But I'm struggling to, like, the worst case scenario ends up being sliding sideways down a very steep slope. I mean, that's really the worst that's happened to me to now. But you also get sucker tracks. When we were doing the ski instructor course, they would always talk about the sucker tracks. And they would say, just because you see tracks going in there doesn't mean the person who went in actually managed to get out again.
That's hilarious. I love that. That's also such a great life lesson. It's like, this is the way everybody's going. Maybe I should go this way as well. It's like, well, everybody dies going that direction. Maybe you should go that direction.
Exactly.
I love that. That's brilliant. So tell me a bit about the challenges living abroad. Are your kids Canadian or are they South African?
That's funny. I actually did a post on LinkedIn a week or two ago about the accent, and my kids literally have 2 accents. One, the English accent that they use when they speak to us in English, which is very rarely, or other South Africans in English, and then a Canadian accent that they speak to their own friends. And it sounds like 2 different people. They literally sound just like a Canadian when they speak to other Canadians, and they sound like a proper Afrikaans person speaking English when they talk to other South African in English. But to answer your question, so they're probably more Canadian than South African, but we've tried very hard to make sure they have strong roots to South Africa. So part of the compromise I had to make with my wife when we decided to go was that we would come every year and visit for at least a month. And except for the COVID years, I think we've been able to do that. And we've continued to do so. This year, actually, my daughter came for the whole Canadian summer. So she was going to end up spending 2 months here over the summer. And my son also, I mean, he's going into his last year of high school now. He's seriously considering coming and spending a year in South Africa after school before he goes to university, because he's going to graduate a year early. So they're probably Canadian, but with very strong roots to South Africa.
How do you, what does a day in your family life look like? Like, how do you keep that South African flame burning?
Well, one, we speak Afrikaans at home, so we make sure that we've all along made sure that they're Afrikaans. They can't probably write, but they can read and they can speak it properly and understand it. And then we visit South Africa once a year, and we follow the rugby and the cricket, and obviously friends with lots of other South Africans, where they get to interact as well. And it's sort of just, it's so much part of who I am and who my wife is, that I think it's just the context within which they grow up. But I think the rugby makes a big difference as well. Like, we went to the World Cup in 2023, and the kids just absolutely loved that.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's really great. Tell me, Justinus, what makes you angry?
What makes me angry? Maybe let me answer it this way. What makes me sad is that we haven't done more to help South Africa prosper in the last 30 years. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of talking about the problems out there and what other people should have done. But as individuals, I think all of us could have done more, and I'm definitely one of those. I could have done more, and I don't want to sit here 30 years from now and look back and feel like I could have done more. I want to make sure I do everything I can in the next 30 years to have the biggest impact I possibly can to help the country move forward. And I think it's such an easy, this whole idea of giving access to talent is such an easy win, that if we do it properly, it makes such a difference. Because let's take Within Code, for example, again. If you take a student that comes from a household that earns less than 70,000 Rand a year, you put them through a 2-year program, and at the end of that program, they earn 250,000 a year or more. You've transformed not just their lives of their siblings, their lives of their parents. You start building out like such a positive ripple effect into society because of what you've done. And if we can multiply that times tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people, we can actually have a significant impact in the country and move it in the right direction. Because the challenges we face are not insurmountable, even though they seem that way often. But if enough of us start doing things on a daily basis to make sure we move the needle in the right direction, then we can make sure that we build a country that works for everybody. And that's the only way, really, to have a long-term, prosperous and sustainable South Africa.
That's very good. What would you say? So we have a range of listeners on this show. So from people running really small businesses to CEOs and founders of really large businesses as well. What would you say to somebody at the sort of entry level that has limited resources? What can they do if there's somebody here that's an employee at a business and they want to change something, want to do something for South Africa? What can they do?
Well, I think part of the thing you can do, especially if you come from a place of limited resources, is build a life that gives you access to more resources and control of more resources, because the more access you have to resources and the more control over resources you have, the more you can make sure they're being spent in a way that impacts not just individuals, but the community and the society at large. So being successful in whatever you choose to do is always going to put you in a better position to influence and make a better impact, and then just pay it forward, even in small ways, create opportunities for people with talent, with no access, find ways to have a positive impact on the people around you. If every single one of us pay it forward in a meaningful way every day, it's just a matter of time before you create a tsunami that renews the country and makes it a better place.
That is very.
I think part of the opportunity we have right now is that the access to information and the tools we have access to build disproportionate outcomes is better than in any other part probably in history. So I think it's within the realm of possibility for almost in any situation that you can engineer a better outcome for yourself by using the tools that we have at our disposal now.
Yeah, that can be very true. Do you have something really practical to give somebody that's something really practical that somebody can do that's like maybe has a really simple life? I'm thinking of a couple of people that I know that listen to this show are not people with great influence, and they do not have great capacity. They have a semi-decent paying job, single mom, two teenage kids in the house. What can they do?
Well, the first thing they can do, obviously, is try and make sure they set up their kids for the best future they possibly can have. Encourage them to educate themselves. Encourage them to figure out. Because I mean, you must remember, many successful people was put on that path or given access to opportunity by their parents. So, as a parent, you have more influence over your kids' lives than probably anybody else. So, making sure you help them build the habits that they need to be able to reach their full potential. I mean, read, listen to podcasts, make sure you give them the opportunities you can and support them and build in them the habits that they need to be successful and build a prosperous career. But I think it all comes back to the way we think about what's possible. So in Grit, there's a chapter 8, I think, the chapter is called Hope. And she talks about the difference between learned helplessness and learned optimism. So as a parent, you can teach your kids to have learned optimism instead of learned helplessness. If you can do that and nothing else, you will increase their chances of success in life dramatically, because if you learn to be optimistic about what you can do and what you can achieve, you end up taking more action. You end up being more successful, and so I think that is a fundamental skill that makes a huge difference.
What do you do with your kids?
Oh, so my son loves baseball. And it's been a very interesting journey with him because most of the kids he competes with comes from families of multi-generational people who've played baseball. So him and I have had to try and figure this out as we go and learn how to do it. So he started definitely at a disadvantage. Luckily for him, physically, he's probably have a bit of an advantage because he's quite tall and strong and he's working very hard at it. But I mean, I really try and make sure we create the space for him as long as he loves it and he wants to do it, where he can both physically and mentally improve his ability to perform under pressure. Because that ability to perform under pressure, even outside of baseball, obviously becomes a very important life skill. So, I mean, I try and listen to audiobooks in the car when we drive somewhere that I think would be good for him. the last few books I let him pick. So we've picked a few autobiographies, just finished the Shane Warne one, and now we're listening to a baseball one. And I try and engage with him in conversations about it and talk about the challenges that the person in the book faced and how it's applicable to him, and just try and create the context where he can think about the challenges that he faced, and then I try and be as much of a mirror as I can for him to test his own thoughts and evolve his thinking on the subject.
I love that. How many kids do you have?
We've got two, a 17-year-old boy and a 15-year-old daughter.
And a 15-year-old daughter. And with your daughter, do you treat them a little bit differently? Do you have a different approach to both of them, or it's like same?
No, they like almost polar opposite. I find my daughter much more challenging. She's much more of a, she's got a very strong personality and a real teenage girl at the moment. So I have to be a little bit more delicate with the interactions with her. But I think what's amazing is that the last 6 weeks that she's been in South Africa has definitely changed or helped her grow quite a bit as well. So I'm quite intrigued to see what's going to be like when we get back home. And so she's also recently started playing volleyball that she really likes. So that creates a lot of the similar opportunities that my son have with baseball. But she's a very determined young lady, and it's going to be interesting to see how she develops. But I can't push her nearly as much as I push my son, because she just pushes back hard instead of working with me.
That's super interesting. Tell me, you've been part of EO for 14 years, right? Yeah,
14 years,
yeah. I've spoken at EO chapters quite a bit, and I'm speaking at a couple now, Kenya next, and then Dubai a bit later in the year.
Oh, awesome.
And I really love it as an outsider, but I'm like, people often ask me, are you an entrepreneur? It's like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a voice crying in the wilderness, some sort of weird prophet person on the side, like screaming obscenities at people. So I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't think so. I don't know. But how has EO shaped you? Because you seem really passionate about it.
Oh, yeah, it's been amazing. So, yeah, I've been in EO for 14 years. I've been in 5 chapters and in 6 traditional forums. And right now, I'm part of a chapter called EO Canada Bridge, which uses a bit of a different format, and then uses forum mashup, which is just the most fantastic thing ever. So, for me, EO, when I joined EO, I was way more, and I joined because I thought I would find the answers to all my business problems. And what I found instead is a evolution of thinking and looking at life in a different way, and focusing on my personal growth more than anything else. That the answers very rarely is out there, and the solutions are often how I need to change and evolve and adapt to the situation more than finding the right answer to solve a problem. And it's been transformational for me. It's been the most amazing experience.
That sounds incredible. What is an example that you can give about how you transformed?
So, like the decision to leave private property, sell my shares, and go live in a ski resort for 2 winters would have never happened if it wasn't for EO, for sure. I mean, really having the opportunity to sit in the room of peers and talk about your deepest fears and the things that keep you up at night in a non-judgmental way. And it's not even the answers or the context or the experience share that the other members give you. It's just the opportunity to think through your own issues out loud, where you have 5 or 6 or 7 other people giving you their full attention. It is such a what's the right word? It's not therapy, obviously not therapy, because there's no professionals in the room, but it just allows you to to articulate your problems, and most of the time, once you've finished talking through it, you feel lighter, and now all of a sudden your brain can start kicking into gear to actually help you find the solutions to it. So that forum process, and especially with forum mashup, it actually enhances the experience for me quite exponentially.
And that's amazing. Like I encounter, so I run a quest every year or every other year, and in the quest we use a process called circling that is very similar to the forum process. And then the act, and I'm always so amazed about how incredibly powerful it is, that the act of being witnessed, that you can say something aloud, and it's often, and I've seen this so many times, this is the first time that somebody has said, given voice to what they're struggling with, or what they fear, or even what they desire. It's not always negative. Just like the first time hearing themselves say their dream aloud or their fear aloud, and that being heard by a community in a safe space is probably one of the most powerful things in the world. And it's, fascinating to me how we've lost so many of those spaces, traditional spaces of community, that we now are forced in a way to create intentional spaces that it would often cost us money to join, to go and to be listened to. But that's why EO is so, what I've learned about EO is that that's the big secret behind it, why it's so powerful. That you get witnessed by, as you said, by peers. Yeah.
Have you read Time to Think by Nancy Klein?
No, I have not. Let me write that down. That sounds good.
So she starts this book by saying that nothing in your life will change until the way you think about it has changed. And she takes down this whole process, and she talks specifically, she's got like a step-by-step process, but like that process of somebody giving you their undivided attention and just opening the door for you to keep talking about the things, it's definitely a transformational process, and it sounds like what you do ties into that really nicely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I've seen it happen and work so often, as I would. I mean, obviously agree with her, but I'll go check out that book, and because our world now is so listening poor. Like we have to pay people to listen to us, which is what therapy really is. But what forums like EO or circles, all these things actually provide us is spaces to be listened to, and to be actually be heard and to be seen. It's so powerful. It's in this noisy, extremely noisy world, and getting ever more noisy with all the, the AI crap that's around us. Get AI spam. So give it.
Let me ask you this question. So, what would you say is the biggest thing in your life that you've ever had a complete turnaround in the way you think about it? Like a complete revelation where you believed the sky was black and now you believe it's white.
Joel, that's a really good question. I think I've had a couple of those where I've changed my mind on topics completely. I'm trying to think of a specific example now. I think I definitely changed my mind quite a bit about something like capitalism. Was actually one of my big turnarounds, where I was always not such a big fan, and in the more recent years, I think the last 5 years or so, was definitely looking and observing the world, going, you know what, we need to do everything that we can to get the world to be wealthier. So everybody needs to be wealthier, and which has become part of my mission, which is why I work with businesses. It's trying to get everybody wealthier, because if you're wealthier, you'll be healthier, and then everybody will be better off. So trying to get everybody wealthier is like a mission. So a very big mission of mine. So that changed my mind completely. Or I changed my mind about that completely.
And so what was the process? What was the steps that led up, and what was the trigger of the eventual revelation that you had?
It's always the same. Like, it's a combination of people. So people that spoke into my lives, people that listened to it, my observation, and reading. I mean, I read a lot. So reading reading and people was the combination of that changed that, and other things as well.
That revelation and changing our minds, because often when I've had one-on-one discussions, especially in my younger days, you think that you can convince somebody by having a debate about it, and that almost never works.
No,
Those revelations happen over time, and it works when people, your context starts to change, and or the people that you trust starts showing you things that you haven't seen. So I've never had a revelation where it was, I went into a conversation, held the belief very strongly, and somebody else convinced me in the moment, and my mind changed from black to white. It's always a process that takes time and needs more context, etc., etc.
No, definitely. Like I definitely agree with that. Like it's always relational. So there's always some sort of relational aspect to it. Like it's a person that you trust, as you said, that helps that change, and then new combined with new information. But never in an argument or in a debate. One of the exceptions I would make, though, is that sometimes my mind was changed in an instant when I was listening to, when I would listen to a talk or to a sermon or to some sort of presentation where I would go and something would click and I go, that's it. And obviously that fits within a larger process and other stuff that's going on in my life. But I've seen that happen. And I think there's something unique in that space when I go out and I speak wherever, whether it's EO or any of the other conferences or whatever, like where people would change in an instant and they would go, you really changed my mind today, or what you said changed my mind today. And people would shift in an instant. And there's something to that. Like I think there was one theologian, he called it the ludicrousy of preaching. This mad idea that you can stand in front of a crowd and say something and then people's lives change. Like it's a really weird idea. Like on the surface you go, this is stupid. Like change doesn't happen like that. But it does. Like I've seen it happen like that. And it's happened to me. Because I'm not in an argument with the person. I think that's the difference. Like I'm not in an argument with the person, but that person is presenting me something that I'm not necessarily agreeing with. But because I'm trusting the context, maybe that plays a role, the space, and I'm trusting that person's authority, and I take that and then consider it and then make an adjustment to my life accordingly. I don't know if you found that or change happen in that way.
I completely agree. But I mean, it's also the context have to allow that person to let the information continue to seep through and be observed and be taken in. And then at some point they get to the point of say, oh, now they have a light bulb moment. So I completely agree with that. But let's go back to the capitalism idea. I would say I've probably gone the other way a little bit, where I grew up a complete and utter believer in capitalism at all cost. And now I have probably a more nuanced view where I think capitalism at all costs leads to good and lots of bad outcomes, and that I think the inequality that it creates is a challenge, and we have to try and find ways to create organizations and businesses that will help fight the inequality in society as well.
Could be. Do you think capitalism creates inequality? And when you said you do, so in what way do you think it creates inequality?
Well, I mean, if you look at over the last, I mean, maybe you should Google and see if I'm right, but my guess is that even in the States, the Gini coefficient has probably increased over the last few decades, right? So the inequality in society has become worse, and the concentration of wealth has become higher. And the extremes of that is what we have in South Africa, where you still have such a delta between the concentration of wealth and the vast quantum of poverty. obviously in South Africa, it's not just capitalism. We obviously had a political system for a long time that perpetuated the inequality. So you can't only lay that at the door of capitalism. And I'm not trying to say capitalism is bad. It's the best system we probably still have. But I think thinking about it in the extremes where we should be purely capitalism, that leads to bad outcomes. And a great example of that is the 2008 financial crisis. We need some blend of strong capitalism with societal rules and norms that protects against some of the extremes, and then we need to do more to create access across the society so that everybody actually has a decent chance of doing something with their lives. And I think a lot of the European countries have done some great work in creating societies where the opportunity and access to opportunity is more equally distributed than some of the more purely capitalistic places.
Yeah, it's very true. I think there's a long discussion to be had about the existence of inequality, and I can definitely agree that equality does exist. The causation of it, I think that's where the conversation gets tricky, because if we talk about South Africa, what causes inequality, and if you talk about the States, what causes inequality, it would be, I think it's an interesting and a long conversation to say whether or not capitalism causes that, or whether there are other factors at play. And I would imagine that there are plenty of other factors in play that would cause inequality, and on a extremely high level. If you think about the policies that drive certain nations and where people want to go to, and then you have to decide if you take the policy into its extremes, you have a capitalist policy or nation, you take that to its extreme, or you take a socialist or the opposite view and you take that to its extreme. The countries that people are always fleeing from are not the ones that are capitalist. That's the countries people are fleeing to. People are always fleeing from the socialist ones. And I can't remember who this was now, but he was saying the Berlin Wall was not built to keep people out. It was built to keep people in. So if you think about that, and obviously capitalism has problems, but if you think about that just as a principle, it's one of the things that shifted my mind, going, well, if people by nature are going to war, to wanting to go to countries where it will be better for them, for their families, that everybody wants the same thing. We want security. We want our kids to grow up in a safe place. We want a future. We want enough to eat. All people want that. But the countries that they're fleeing to are capitalist countries. They're not fleeing to the other countries. They're not fleeing to Venezuela. Nobody's knocking on the door of Venezuela going, please let me in. I really want to live in a socialist country. So it's a very sticky and interesting conversation.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Do you think there's a country that is 100% total capitalist only?
No, of course not. I think there's if you take it on a high level of abstraction, I think you could make a debate like that. But I think there's a scale between the two. And I would agree. I think the Scandinavian countries do a very good job of blending a capitalist economy with socialist policies. And there's always a sticky, and which is why education is such an interesting topic for me, because what should be free? And I think should have easy access to, right? So, and I think that's where often things like the States get it sometimes properly wrong, where healthcare for me is something that should be free. Like it should be free or have a very low barrier. But education for me shouldn't have a low barrier to entry. Like it should be hard. Like it should be not necessarily be hard to get in, but hard to graduate. Like the conversation we had earlier. And where I think in South Africa we often get it completely wrong. We're like, we'll make it easy to graduate. We'll just lower the standard. And then everybody has a matric or everybody has a degree. And that's a terrible way to run a country. Like you're not building any kind of human capital doing that. But then healthcare and like with the NHI and all those kind of policies, that's one way and it's sticky. I don't think any country in the world knows how to run that properly. like the countries where it is completely free, like in Canada, or free. And I like, if free, it's not really free, it's included. I was like, I have that argument with people. It's free. It's like, no, it's not free. It's included. So, and then, but then you sit in these long lines, you can't get access, you can't get the healthcare that you want as fast as you need it. Like there's a whole bunch of other problems with that. But I mean, there's a mix that's a good mix. What my beef is often with people, it's like we need to, this narrative that the billionaires have taken all the money and then we can't have any because they took everything. I don't think that's true, because the billionaires are not.
But that's just a scarcity mindset instead of a growth mindset. No, I agree.
Exactly.
But what I find fascinating.
Yeah. Go.
Sorry. What I find fascinating is where we draw the line. Like, because even the States is probably the purest example I can think of right now of a capitalist economy. But even they do, there's things that they decide the community must do for the community instead of the individual. So like defense there is a expense that the United States as a country decided they are going to pay for from a federal level. Why do they decide to do that for defense but not for healthcare? The example, why do they draw the line there? In Canada, we said, okay, defense falls in there, but healthcare falls in there and education falls in there as well. And then, well, let me say, till high school education. And then in Scandinavia, they said, well, all of those things plus secondary education is also should. So everybody draws the line at a different point. And often we get sort of sucked into this labeling of capitalist versus socialism, but everything is actually, I think, more of shades of grey in between rather than a pure system on one end. And everybody just draws the line at a different place.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's that's the problem. And really talking about, for me, it's like very much being very honest about what causes it, because in my view, and of some of the things that I've read and seen and stats, and talking about almost every single country that has extreme social welfare programs end up with poorer people with less human capital. Like it's not a good thing to take people's agency away from them, their ability to develop their own human capital. And obviously that's a big discussion, because at what point, how much do you help? Like we had, like the discussion we had earlier, when do you help? How do you provide access? It's a very sticky thing, but it's something, if I read economists like Thomas Sowell and his view on the social welfare policies in the States from the 1960s and how that affected the black community, it's fascinating. And also across the pond in the UK, like how the social welfare there has affected people and removing their agency. Like if you're going to incentivize, if you're going to pay people if they have children out of wedlock and give them a home and a better salary than somebody working, guess what's going to happen? People are you're incentivizing people to have children out of wedlock and not work. And then you are very surprised 20 years down the line why your country is struggling. Like that's, for me, like talking about causation of inequality, not necessarily talking about whether it's capitalism or social, or can we be really honest about what is actually causing it? So, sticky conversation.
Of course. But the world's problems aren't simple to solve, so it all needs sticky conversations.
At least we have rugby. Rugby is simple to solve. Well, or maybe not.
Well, as long as we keep winning, then we'll be happy.
As long as we keep winning, we can keep the momentum going. We just need to win like every 10 years, and then South Africa seems to be fine. Just a couple of wrap-up questions, Justinus. What are you going to do next? What lies ahead for you?
I mean, for me, I'm really passionate about this endowment that we want to start, and Flip and I am going to start a podcast called Winning the Way Game, which we want to use as sort of a marketing machine for the endowment as well, and it's going to be focused on interviewing successful South Africans abroad, together with a retired Springbok rugby player, and the idea is just to draw the parallels between starting over when you move to another country and starting over when you retire from rugby, and try and learn lessons from that. And part of the thing we also want to do is that I want to try and reframe the thinking around South Africans abroad, because often they get seen as people who sort of abandoned ship. And I think there's more mutual benefit for everybody if we can see them as assets that's gone abroad, build a successful life, and can help us improve the country. Because at least for me and many of the other South Africans abroad I talk to, we're still very passionate about the country and we want to do things to make it a better place. So I think if we can build a community around that, about South Africans that's abroad, that's been very successful, that we can build the endowment and we can have something that's really amazing and that can help South Africa solve some of the challenges that we face. So, I mean, I want to spend most of the rest of my life working on that problem and hopefully through the work we do contribute in a little way, in a small way, to winning 5 of those next 10 World Cups.
Fantastic. I love that. What is a book that changed your life?
The number one book that changed my life. Well, I'll say 2. So the first one, The Art of Possibility. One of the rules he says in The Art of the Possibility is you have to realize it's all made up. So whatever problem you think you're facing, it's probably mostly made up, and you can make up the solution just as well as the problem was made up. So that was a fascinating book. And then the other one by Mo Godad called Solve for Happy, which is an absolutely mind-blowing book. So he comes from an engineering background, and for a long time in his life, he wanted to come up with this formula of what it takes to be happy in life. And then about 10 years into that journey, his son died because of medical malpractice on the operating table when he was 21 years old. And he tells the story of how he basically had to reevaluate his life and this formula he had come up with in the wake of this absolute devastation of losing his son. And the audiobook is fantastic because he reads it himself, and you can feel the raw emotion in his voice as he talks about this thing. And one of the things I realized, and the formula is sort of, not that I want to give away the book, but it really comes down to the expectations we have of every day and how the reality of the situation we live in measures up to our expectations. And when our expectations are more than the reality we face, we end up being sad or unhappy. And when the reality is more than our expectations, we end up being happy. And part of the way we make sure we're happy is by finding joy in ordinary things. So I'm completely obsessed with Nando. So for me, any day that I can have Nando's anywhere in the world ends up being a fantastic day. And that's one of the lessons I learned out of that book. I've always loved Nando's, but then after I read the book, I just decided I'm going to completely lean into it. I'm going to have the best time of my life every time I walk into a Nando's, and I'm going to make sure I do it as often as possible. So it sort of reframed the way I think about what it takes to be happy. And so that book was fantastic.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really good. So I love that book. I love Mo Godad as well. Like, he's a really interesting human. But I haven't read that book yet. One last one. What is a quote that you live by?
The Nelson Mandela one that says it always seems impossible until it's done.
I love that. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a good one. Well, thank you, Justinus, for spending some time here on Through the Fog. Where can people find you online?
LinkedIn, probably the best place. Share most of the content there, and then if you follow me on LinkedIn, we're going to start talking about the podcast and the endowment in the next few months, working really hard to get all of that ready, and very excited about what we can do and how we can have an impact.
Awesome. We'll be sure to post that in the show notes. Thank you so much, and go and be brave. Thank you for listening or watching, and thank you for being on this journey with me as we try and figure out and find our way through the fog of life and work. So I've been writing a really short little daily letter that comes out each weekday, and literally very short. It's less than 50 words. And it is a burst of inspiration with some thoughts on strategy, how to find your way, how to become a better human being and do work that matters. You can go to thisispierre.co/daily letter to sign up and become a part of this community and hear about all the things that we get up to firsthand. Thank you for being a part.